What's going on, guys? This is VinylicPuma, back with another Borderlands 3 video, and today I figured it could be fun to talk about some of what we know about the new Borderlands 3 characters, Zane and Amara, and come to a conclusion as to which character is best in a sort of face-off or versus. Now, it's important to mention that this video is going to engage in a lot of speculation. After all, we don't really have a super concrete understanding of all of Borderlands 3's mechanics just yet, and it's also worth considering that a bunch of aspects of these skills, such as the percent bonuses they provide, could change leading up to the game's release. That said though, I do feel reasonably confident that much of these characters' designs aren't going to really change all that much between now and the game's final release, and in fact, I think I can even declare a winner between these two characters based on what we currently know. But as one last thing before we start, I'd like to ask you guys a fun little riddle, and that is, what has hands but cannot clap? Be sure to let everyone know what you think the answer is in the comments, and also be sure to smash the like button on this video as it really helps out the channel. Otherwise, guys, let's just jump in here and discuss some of the differences between Zane and Amara. For our most obvious difference, Amara is meant to be Borderlands 3's Siren class, while Zane is meant to be this game's operative class, or in other words, like the quasi-soldier/assassin class. Both of these characters have 3 action skills each, and for Zane, you have Sentinel, which is reminiscent of Wilhelm's wolf drone from the pre-sequel, Digiclone, which is reminiscent of Jack's doppelganger ability from the pre-sequel with the unique ability to swap places with the clone, and Barrier, which drops a barrier that can block incoming projectiles, and shooting through the barrier will boost damage. As for Amara, she has Phase Slam, which makes her just jump up in the air and then slam the ground, dealing direct damage to enemies. Phase Cast, which allows Amara to emit a projection of herself at enemies to deal damage. And finally, Phase Grasp, which is similar to, but different from Maya's Phase Lock from Borderlands 2. Though obvious, the reason it's important to mention all of this is because Zane is actually somewhat unique amongst any playable Borderlands characters so far, in that he has been designed with the ability to equip 2 out of his 3 action skills at the exact same time, while Amara can only equip 1. The way this works is that you can equip a second action skill to what would normally be his grenade throw button or key, and upon doing so, he can use his other action skill that he has equipped. So you could potentially go Sentinel and Digiclone, Digiclone and Barrier, and I guess Barrier and Sentinel. With this said, however, Amara may actually have a bit of an advantage when it comes to action skill augments. This is because Amara appears to have the ability to equip 3 augments per action skill, while Zane can only equip 2 per action skill. And while this yields more action skill augmentations on Zane in total, Zane is at the disadvantage of most of his augments being specific to 1 action skill from a given skill tree. So you can really only use augments for Digiclones that are compatible with Digiclones, and not necessarily those same augments with the Sentinel action skill. Amara has a little bit more freedom in this regard, and this is because Amara can select an attack component, which usually seems to be tied to a specific action skill like you might see on Zane. She can select an effect component, which appears can be used across any available action skill you equip it to, and you can also equip an optional elemental component, which allows you to change the type of elemental damage your action skill will deal. So if you want to phase cast and fire elements, cause a singularity, and then combine all of that with the reverberation augmentation, which allows phase cast to deal increased damage for every enemy that it hits, you could potentially do that. You can also go Corrosive Phase Slam with Downfall, which allows you to emit an elemental beam before slamming, while also benefiting from Soul Sap, which allows you to heal from the damage you deal from the Phase Slam. So Zane definitely may have an advantage when it comes to how many action skills he can use at once. However, Amara seems to have much greater control over how her individual action skills function. At this point, and if you ask me, it's really just going to come down to the quality of the action skills themselves. To be honest, it's kind of hard to speak to the quality of these things themselves. However, if we go based on the mechanics of previous Borderlands games, I think Zane may actually have an edge here. This is because in Borderlands the pre-sequel, Cryo was quite powerful as an improved critical hit and explosive damage dealt to enemies, while also immobilizing them. Assuming these mechanics are carrying over into Borderlands 3, Zane's Sentinel has the potential to freeze enemies, essentially setting them up for easy criticals or damage from Torg and other explosive type weaponry. So assuming you spec for the Sentinel action skill and make sure to pick up its Winter's Drone Augment, you can use it to freeze enemies. From here, you might want to combine this with Bad Dose, which can apply the new radiation element to enemies for an additional debuff, or you can pair it with Boomsday or Almighty Ordnance to deal additional explosive damage from the rockets to the enemies that you just froze. It's also worth mentioning that Zane can also apply Cryo via his Digiclone action skill and through the Binary System Augment, which deploys a Cryonova around both Zane and his clone when you swap places. So again, and assuming cryo mechanics are similar to the pre-sequel, it seems like Zane has a bit of an edge here. As for Amara, she doesn't appear to have a way to freeze enemies with her elemental augments, as they only cover fire and corrosive elements, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about this in the comments, but I believe the default damage of Amara's action skill is shock damage. So that's not really an option for freezing either. Granted, I'm assuming cryo mechanics are the same as they were in the pre-sequel and are as powerful as they were in the pre-sequel in coming to this conclusion. But again, and if I had to make a prediction based on what I know, Zane seems to have an edge here. Plus, you can use two action skills at once with Zane, and in both instances, you can use both to deal cryo and freeze enemies. Now that we've wrapped up action skills, it's time we talk about skill trees. Painting with a broad brush, I think it's fair to say that Zane is very kill skill oriented thanks to his middle Hitman tree. However, unlike Borderlands 2, where Axton had some problems because of this, Zane has the ability to activate his kill skills via C and Red, which merely requires you to activate an action skill to activate all of your corresponding kill skill buffs. Additionally, you have the Hitman tree's Capstone, Death Follows Close, which increases both the effect and duration of any of the kill skills you've spec'd for, which is a pretty big deal and seems like a recommended path to take for this character, especially if you plan on using Sentinel. As for Zane's other trees, I think Doubled Agent could be best described as focusing primarily around activating action skills, affecting the Digiclone action skills abilities directly, while also having a few grenade-related skills like Duct Tape Mod, which allows the player to use grenades by firing them along with conventional projectiles. For Undercover, I think it's fair to say it's primarily focused around the barrier, with many skills allocating buffs to the player based on properly maintaining your shields, which is best done by being in the barrier. When it comes to Amara's skill trees, I think Brawl can be best described as the close quarters / bulk tree. The Fist of the Elements tree can be described as the elemental damage tree, while Mystical Assault is in part based on rush stacks, which provide stat bonuses depending on what skills you select that are lost when you actually use your action skill. Of the three, it's worth noting that Mystical Assault in particular seems to possess some fairly powerful skills, with Remnant being able to deploy an orb that can deal overkill damage to enemies, and Laid Bare, which can make it so enemies take increased damage from all sources after taking damage from Amara's action skill. Additionally, Mystical Assault contains the Avatar Capstone, which potentially lets you use Amara's action skill during cooldown, while also boosting your overall rush stack count. So I'd say there are definitely some pretty nice and powerful skills in the Mystical Assault tree. As said previously, Fist of the Elements seems more elemental weapons focused, with notable skills like Tempest, which boosts elemental and shock damage, which sounds like it would be great for elemental weapons, and Forceful Expression, which adds additional damage to weapons based on Amara's action skill element. There are also some decent utility skills here like Dread, which allows boosted gun damage for phase-grasped enemies, and if the grasped enemy is defeated, it instantly reloads the magazine. And of course, there's also the action skill augment Allure, which seems like it would be nice when combined with Phase Grasp, and in that sense it would work much like Maya's Converge skill from Borderlands 2. As for Brawl, many of the skills here are either intended for close range or they center around adding additional bulk. In the case of the former, skills like Personal Space and Job Cross can improve damage based on proximity to an enemy or by performing a melee attack first to get the boost, while other skills in the tree like Guardian Angel, Helping Hands, and Root to Rise provide fight for life bonuses, damage reduction, or maximum health improvements. So in that sense, Brawl might remind you of Brick somewhat, provided you played the very first Borderlands. As for which character has the better skill tree though, it's hard to say, but I think it could actually be Amara in this case. Based on what we know of a lot of Zane's kill skills, many of them look like traditionally additive bonuses, boosting things like gun damage, fire rate, and reload speed, which are definitely nice for an overall DPS increase. Amara, on the other hand, has access to things like overkill damage through Remnant, which seems like it could scale as high as your most powerful weapons would allow, while Laid Bare may actually provide a multiplicative damage debuff, similar to something like Zero's Kunai. Additionally, and if Borderlands 2 was any guide, elemental damage bonuses were always superior to gun damage bonuses, and because of that, Amara may also have an advantage over Zane thanks to skills like Tempest and Forceful Expression. Now keep in mind, and like I mentioned when discussing action skills, we're doing a lot of speculation here based off of a bunch of assumptions that mechanics will be similar to how they were in previous games. So it's entirely possible that Zane in practice has a better skill tree than Amara, or vice versa. However, based off of all of the limited info we currently have, I think Amara may actually have a slightly stronger skill tree. After all, having the ability to instantly revive upon entering Fight for Life, instantly using your action skill mid-cooldown, or having access to skills that allow for overkill damage are going to give Amara a bit of an edge compared to Zane. Though I suppose we'll actually have to get our hands on the game first before we can determine a lot of this stuff. At this point though, we've gone over the action skills and the skill trees, and I'd say Zane has an advantage in the former, while Amara has an advantage in the latter. The question is, who is better overall? For me personally, I'd probably pick Zane since I've always preferred characters throughout the series that have an action skill that's similar to what he has. However, the thing is, I think we're going to need a tiebreaker. So let's talk about each character's capstone skills. For Amara, we have Avatar, which allows her to use her action skill while in cooldown. Blitz, which is a melee override that allows her to perform a dash at enemies and deal an elemental melee strike. And Forceful Expression, which adds additional elemental damage to your weapons based on the action skill element you've equipped. For Zane, we have Distributed Denial, which extends the effects of your shield to your barrier. Double Barrel, which grants your Digiclone a copy of the current weapon you have equipped upon activating that action skill. And Death Follows Close, which improves the effectiveness and duration of all of your kill skills. Based on my experiences with Gage in Borderlands 2, gear sharing skills tend to either provide a massive up or downside depending on the gear itself. At the very least, I think it's fair to say that these types of abilities tend to be more gear dependent, which could be a problem if you don't have access to all of the best and most optimized gear in the game. So Zane may actually require a lot more high quality gear to make a lot of this stuff work, while Amara, on the other hand, it just seems like you can make everything work for her and it's a lot less gear dependent. So with that in mind, Amara, I think, may have a bit of an advantage in this department. So I think if I were to declare a winner right now, I might actually have to pick Amara, simply on my perception of the quality of her skills. Granted, it's possible many of these skills don't function like I think, and we aren't even including any game-changer class mods for either character here, but as things stand right now, I do think Amara may actually be a little bit better. Now, to be fair, it is worth considering that we're basing this conclusion, prediction, or whatever you want to call it, on a ton of assumptions. After all, it's totally possible Zane has a really amazing gear combo that just destroys everything like Salvador did in Borderlands 2, and that puts him over the edge once the game finally releases. But again, and from what I'm seeing here, Amara may actually have the edge overall. After all, some of her skills seem pretty good by Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel standards. But what do you guys think? Do you guys agree with me and think that Amara is the better of the two, or do you think that Zane is simply better overall? feel free to let everyone know in the comments section below. And as always, be sure to smash like, click the bell so you can be notified when I upload my next video. And as always, and again, thank you all so much for supporting this channel. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.